many of you have been asking about what happens from here on. I think, and I know many of you agree with me, that this is unquestionably the right thing to do. There is a problem with the SFGEX, which we've all loved, and many of you for so many years, and it's wrong, it's morally wrong for us simply to look the other way and pretend that it isn't happening. However, human nature being what it is, once we go away from here, because it's very easy to talk the talk, especially when you're among people who agree with you. When you go away from here, you'll go back to your respective mass centres in different parts of the country where you came from, and there will be people who don't agree with you, and there will be no resistance mass centre on your doorstep, and there will be an SSPX church that you're used to going to and that you sort of feel at home in. The temptation will be that, and the temptation will be that any good resolutions you make, you will backslide on them. It's the same for any of us. I include myself in that. There will be a strong temptation to say, well, okay, this Sunday we'll just go to Mass. And we won't, but we'll just go to Mass. And then it's one little step after another. So, I say that first of all because that's partly why we want to keep everybody in touch with each other, but also the intention is, we got the hire of this hall fairly easily. I think that the people who we hired it from are by now, one would hope, perfectly satisfied that we're not neo-Nazis, and I think it would be reasonable to assume that we could get the hire of this hall quite easily on Sundays in the future. I don't think they very often have people hiring it on a Sunday, especially not on a Sunday morning. We wouldn't need to have it all day in the future. We would just need to have it for 2 or 3 hours. So this, I think, and I hope, and I will confirm it with you all afterwards when I've been able to go home and sort 1 or 2 things out, it will become a permanent fixture. This will be the Resistance Mass Centre in London from now on. Now, as to where the priests come from to say the Mass, it's something of an unknown quantity. To some extent we have to trust in divine providence. There are other priests. We're extremely grateful to Father Pfeiffer and Father Yuko for coming all the way from America. We don't want to have to rely on them travelling 3,000 miles just so that we can have the Mass and rely only on them. And actually, in theory, we shouldn't have to. There's one priest here, one priest there, one priest there, who are a bit closer, even if they're not in England. Some of you know their names. I'll tell you a bit about them afterwards. And if we could get one priest to say this Mass and another priest to say that Mass, we could, I think, from now on, at the very least, have a monthly Mass here. What we do in the meantime, it's perfectly feasible for us to hire the hall for an hour or 2 hours, come here, meet, say, 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and we say the Rosary, and whatever, we could do catechism or whatever. But the point is, we're here. We're still in the habit of leaving home on a Sunday morning, making a point of making the effort to go somewhere, seeing everybody, and talking to everybody else in the Mass Centre, and so on. And eventually, I'm confident that eventually it won't be long before Almighty God provides us with priests. We have to have confidence that that will happen because, after all, this is the right thing to do. I'm completely convinced of that. And if it's the right thing to do, we have confidence in Almighty God. He will look after us. So, stay tuned. Provisionally, we'll say, and it hasn't been booked yet, but we'll look into it. We'll come back here, those of you who are able to, next week, Sunday, 10 a.m. And if we don't have a priest to say Mass, we will at the very least say the Rosary together, and then it's better than simply staying at home and getting into bad habits. Now, there's another thing, which is an idea that I wanted to float with you. I can't take any credit for it, or any blame if you think it's crazy. It's not my idea, it's somebody else here, but many of you will know there is the SSPX has a national pilgrimage at the end of July, which some of us always used to go on. And it's one of the painful tragedies that some of us think that we feel that we can't really participate in that anymore either. In any case, although there's a kind of a temptation to say, well, we'll just turn up and we'll make a nuisance of ourselves and we'll argue with the people there and we don't care what they throw us off, fine. In a way, I don't think that's the right thing to do. It does, for me, it does smack of this idea of we'll go in and convert them from the inside. It's fairly clear, it's becoming more clear where people stand, it's becoming more clear where the priests stand. This is an Essex event, it's a Bishop Gensingen event, even if we know the priests of this country who are running it, we know their position, and unfortunately it seems they're not prepared at the moment, at least, to stand up against Mensingen. So that's effectively, that's a neo-Essex event. I, therefore, the way I feel now is I don't really want to go on it. Now, all very well, what can we do instead? We could have our own little pilgrimage elsewhere. I personally favour the idea of going to Walsingham. I have no idea whether this would work or not. Again, we could have a look into it, and if there are only 20 of us there and we have our own little pilgrimage to Walsingham at the end of July, why not? Anyway, it's something that can be sorted out at the time, and hopefully if we're able to stay in touch with each other, we will let you know about it in due course, God willing. A lot of crazy ideas very often turn out to be providential.
What day is it? What day is the pilgrimage?
It's the last weekend in July. So
Saturday and Sunday?
Saturday, Sunday, yeah. It's the 22nd of July. Friday and Sunday, yeah.
But Greg, it doesn't have to be the same time.
It doesn't have to be the same time, that's true. If it wouldn't work on that weekend, we could do it some other time. It is true. Yeah. Anyway, good. I think that was all I wanted to say. I will hand you over to Father Pfeiffer now.
This is just, yesterday we signed a letter to Father Morgan. It's just, well, maybe you know answer the discussion, but I know of one priest who was breaking off some time ago to write an Mensingen.
Yes.
And as a punishment he was sent to Carmel.
Yes.
That priest is definitely sharing our views.
There are a lot of priests who share our views, but sharing our views in itself, it doesn't do anyone any good. You are privileged enough to know what that priest thinks. But what about the 101 other people who he says Mass for, who don't know what he thinks? If he doesn't say so in the sermon, if he doesn't say so publicly, how are they going to know? And I personally, I don't really see, I'm getting a bit tired of the idea of moaning about Mensingen in private and doing nothing in public. The priest has a duty, surely, to defend his flock. You can't defend the flock by moaning in private, you have to do it publicly. Yeah, okay. So, anyway, I hand over to Father Pfeiffer.
Okay, we can go ahead and see up there again. Glory be to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost. As it was in the beginning, is now, and shall be glorified. Saint Vincent Ferrer, pray for us. Jude, pray for us. Victory, pray for us. Sorrows, pray for us. Yes, Christians, pray for us. Jesus, pray for us. In any case, I wanted to deal here with some objections. I wanted to deal with some objections because yesterday I was a little disappointed in that nobody gave any objections. Too friendly of a crowd. I was really hoping, I was very happy about so many people coming. I didn't expect that. But I also thought there'd be one or two hecklers in the crowd that would come and make their attacks and make it a little more interesting. But they didn't come. Maybe you scared them off, I don't know. But the hecklers didn't come, So, but in any case, one thing like Mr. Taylor was saying, and we want to say this here now, there's no praise intended. But you look at this particular event, basically, Mr. Taylor put it all together. more or less by himself. And what's happening is that people are coming together. It takes a catalyst, so to speak, to pull people together. And that's a layman operating. Now, obviously, when a priest does something, it's going to pull more people together. And if a bishop does something, it's going to pull more people together. And if a pope does something, it's going to pull many more people together. In fact, it will cause the conversion of Russia and the conversion of the world. So, but the fact remains that if the pope's not working, the bishop doesn't have an excuse for not working. And if the bishop isn't working, the priest doesn't have an excuse for not working. And if the priest isn't working, the faithful don't have an excuse for not working. So that each one, we do have to pull together practical steps, because you look at the course of this last year, what has made it possible, what has made it necessary for there to be a constant reminding? The bishop related to tell us every week, for instance, I haven't changed, the same as I always was. Why does he have to say that every week? Because there are voices telling him that he has changed. And there are voices, living voices, saying, this is not right what's going on. And we're taking steps because we recognize that in order to save our souls, we have to have an incarnational truth. Truth is not in a book. It must be incarnational. It has to be in a living voice. It has to be in living sacraments. It has to be in the living, the confessional, and so on. The truth of faith is incarnational. And so therefore, that's why faithful have called all around the world for the few of us priests to go and visit them. Other priests also asking for support and so on. And so we are trying to support them. We're trying to help them to do the preaching of the truth and living by the truth. It's incarnational, our church. We've got to recognize that our church is incarnational and that we can't spread the faith by only spreading literature. Even though we must spread literature, it's one of the things that we have to do. But it's by real people doing real things that we spread the truth. This is one of those things. That's why I was trying to get from Mr. Taylor the report of enemy territory. Because today, we must recognize the practical side of this event today. Bishop Pfeiffers is on one side of town, SSPX bishop, with SSPX priests. And on the other side of town, there's two SSPX priests on the other side of town. Similar to what happened on a much smaller scale in Korea. When I was in Korea, there are 50 faithful in Korea, 55 faithful, plus or minus in Korea, of the whole of society. And through the warning of Father Couture, they went in. The chapel is owned by a lady who supports us. And he told her, don't allow Father Giselle to say Mass, the normal routine. He said, I'm going to allow Father Giselle to say Mass. And then Father Giselle said, well, Father Pfeiffers, my superior, asked him what you should do. So she called me from Korea and said, what should we do? Should I allow Father Couture to say Mass? I said, of course, let him say Mass. He's been saying Mass there. Let him continue to say Mass there. So Father Couture came in and said Mass, and Father Winoda. So at one point we had 52 faithful and 4 priests. 4 priests. It ended up being that way. And so, but what happened is Father says, no, I'm going to, he broke into the chapel. They took a hammer, they broke into the chapel, they pulled out all the vestments, and they ripped out all the things that they could so that Father Giselle and I would not be able to use them for Mass. Now they told them, you shouldn't do that. And of course, when they did that, of course, that made Dr. Kim, now she knows which side she's going to definitely stay on. So, but there was no reason for them to do something like that, but that's what they did. And so we came into the chapel, and the door smashed open, and they kind of repaired it, but the damage is still there. And we have our maskets who were able to set up for the Mass, and they were able to save a few things for the Mass. So we said the Mass. And it was interesting, that night when we were there, it was my first visit to Korea with Father Giselle. We went there together and said the Mass. About 25, 27 of the people were with us, and about 15, 20 people. We had slightly more on our side than they had on their side. So Father Giselle, he called up Father Couture. And he said, Father, how about Father Pfeiffer and I, Father Joseph and I, we're inviting you and Father Winoda out to dinner, so we can have an ecumenical gathering. In the interest of ecumenism. And Father Couture said, well, I'm sorry, but I can't go to the ecumenical gathering. And well, why not? Because it's going to be on the internet tomorrow. So he wouldn't come. And so we didn't have our ecumenical gathering. But basically what happened is that we had one priest on the one side of town, another priest on the other side of town, and they were fighting. Now this is an unfortunate thing. We don't want to be in that kind of situation. But here we are again today. But why are we here? And it could summarize it the way Bishop Williamson spoke with Cardinal Hoyos. He said to Cardinal Hoyos, he says, your peanuts are tasty, your drink is drinkable, it's really nice being with you, but we're two different religions. Two different religions. That's what Bishop Williamson told Cardinal Hoyos in the meeting of the three bishops with Cardinal Hoyos at the dinner. You know, your peanuts are tasty. I guess Bishop Williamson likes peanuts. And your drinks are drinkable. You know, and although I always thought as a child that was not an English word. I always thought you had to say potable. But nobody says that anymore, do they? I was told drinkable is not a word, and I was hit for that. But now I guess it became a word somehow. Bishop Williamson made it into an official word. So they said your drinks are drinkable and your peanuts are tasty. But we're two different religions. And so that's what we're dealing with right now. And just like Father Giselle said last year in a writing to Bishop Father Couture, he says, look, we are at war. It's true. But why are we at war? Because of differing theologies. If you really and truly believe that your theology is correct, this new theology of the Society of Pius X, and you really and truly believe that our theology is incorrect, then you should argue against us with charity, based on truth. We're finding that they're not able to do that. We're finding that, for instance, even the latest attack against the Requisite, filled with lies. Well, what are the lies? What are the lies? You know, a blatant attack against a society. What's the attack? We are attacking specifically the new doctrine of Bishop Fillet, which is written and published. We are attacking specifically the new doctrine contained in the teaching.org, SSPX.org, and that we discover in the practice and the teaching of the priests in the various parishes. Many other priests still find themselves inside the Society of St. Pius X, such as the vast majority of priests here in England, don't like the new theology and the new direction.
No.
But they find themselves in a quandary. And we mentioned the example last night. Let's suppose that you're the strongest man in the world and your name is Hercules. And you are going to wait for the deer to pass by, which happens once every couple of years. So just in case you're ready, you only pass by for a couple of seconds, you pull the bow and the arrow back. And you wait. And you're strong enough, because you're a really strong guy, to hold that for a deer. Now the deer comes by, and you let go. What happens? The arrow falls on the ground. Because the bow can't take the pressure of being pulled at its maximum torque for that long. And if it's in 6 months, you let go, the arrow goes to the end of your hand, the feather hits the end of your hand, and the arrow falls on the ground. And if you hit it, it might kill a fly. The deer might be grateful because there was a fly at that spot, and you killed the fly. But you're not going to hurt the deer. You can't stay in this position forever. One of two things has to happen. One of them is your muscles give out. That's the most common thing. Your muscles give out. And if your muscles give out, you can no longer, when the time comes, a deer comes by, you're so tired, you can't pull it back. That's the most common problem. The second problem is that you're ski man, Hercules, and you keep your bow back, and now your weapon loses its power. So one of two things is going to happen. Your muscles will lose their power, or your weapon will lose its power. Both cases create the same result: inability to fight. Inability to do harm to the enemy. And this is what's happening. You know, one of the priests was speaking to him last week from the islands here, telling me, well, I'm still against what's going on. And I'm still trying to preach against what's going on. And, I'm still preaching against what's going on. I'm still against what's going on. But I said, okay, can you condemn the deal that the Bishop Fillet wants to make with Rome? Oh, no, I can't do that. Okay. We are not battling modernism of Paul VI. He's dead, and he's been judged by God. We're not battling the modernism of Paul VI. We are battling the modernism of Menzingen that is affecting our faithful today. We're battling the modernism that is in the church in 2012, 2013. We're not battling the problem of the Monothelites back in the 600s and the 500s. We're battling an error today, and we have to protect our sheep against the error today, and we have to warn the sheep against the error today. He says, well, I try to do that, but I can only do it indirectly. He said, what about those sheep, just like Mr. Taylor mentioned earlier, what about those sheep that don't know you personally, that only see you in the pulpit on Sunday? How can they know that you're against the modernism of Menzingen? Well, they can't. They can't. So what happens over time? We're finding several of these priests, now they just don't want to talk about it anymore. Last year, we were talking about it. We were talking about liberalism and modernism. Oh, it's terrible what Bishop Fillet did last week. But after a while, it's a bit like the abuses. Now when you hear, did you know what happened in my parish? What happened in your parish? The priest was dancing during Mass. Really? Okay. That happens every week. It's happened every week for the last 40 years. I'm tired of hearing it. Right? You know, so when you first hear it, you're shocked and scandalized. When you hear it the 40th time, you say, oh, is that all he did? He only danced? Wow, he's a pretty good priest. So what happens is we start to change our expectations. This is happening to the priests. Priests are telling me now, well, you saw the reaction, well, Father Morgan said in his official letter, you saw the retraction, the withdrawal of Bishop Fillet. He didn't withdraw anything. But because it sounds better compared to what he said last month, it's now not that bad. We start to change our comparison. As an example, remember I told you I'm visiting more than 300 priests in the last several years about coming to the Latin Mass. I remember one time I did like 8 or 10 priests in the same day. And it was a bad day. They were like the most, they didn't believe in God. They were horrible, you know. They were just terrific. Finally I got the 5th, 6th, or 7th priest. We did a lot of them one day at that time. And I got the priest and he said, you know, I really, you know, I tell you, Father, I'm pretty convinced that I think probably that Jesus is probably God. And I thought, oh, this guy's a Catholic. This guy is traditional. He's the most traditional man I've ever heard in my life. Why? Because I was thinking of the other 6 priests earlier that day. They were worshiping Satan. So compared to those guys, this guy was good. And so, you know, so that what happened is, I remember when he said that, I was like, wow, this guy's good. Yeah. Because you no longer are comparing to the truth. You're no longer comparing to the doctrine. You're comparing to the others. Once we start comparing to the others, we're dead. Yeah. And this is happening in society right now. The priests are telling me about the other liberal priests. And they're so much against the other liberal priests. And they're trying to combat the other liberal priests. What's happening? We're no longer looking at Christ. We're no longer looking at the truth. We're looking by way of comparison. And what's happening? Both things are happening. Arm is getting weaker, and the bow is losing its strength. And we are no longer able to be warriors. That's why it's so important. One reason why, you know, that we're flying around a lot during the course of this last year is because there's a limited time. Humanly speaking, God can convert anyone at any time. But there is a limited time in which you can hold that arm back on that bow. And that limited time is coming to an end. And that's why I think it's so important to establish the resistance chapel here. The limited time is coming to an end. We have to do something. Now I wanted to go through some of the means. Establish a chapel. You come and meet. I'm going to meet with the priest tomorrow. And I'm going to firmly trying to encourage him to come over here and say the Mass and tell him about how things went. And say, look, Father, you stand firm with the tradition. And you know, there's going to be other priests, I think, that will join you. We'll find a way to put them together. And his heart and mind are 100% with us, or more than that. At least a low 100% will be a low number. And but it's just that the practical side is always terrifying. And I say, look, yeah, Father can live in poverty and all that, but I say, look, you got to travel. Look at the travel expenses. I say, look, no, it's possible. You can take a train over to London, you can fly over to Glasgow, fly over to Dublin. There's several ways to do it. Take a combination of trains and planes and to the various places. And then we can come once in a month, come twice in a month. And you'll still be able to support people in Europe, a small group that's there, but it will grow. It will grow. It'll grow. And then we'll be able to go from place to place, and we'll be able to survive. So I'd say you put together some funds. Like I would recommend that when you have your Mass here, or your prayers on Sunday, those that are able to come. And I know that it's a process. You know, we're, like Mr. Taylor was telling me earlier, you know, it's not very hard to join our club. There aren't too many rituals of entry. It's not that hard, not that many requirements. You know, you just kind of come in and you're like, oh, you're here? Okay, you're with us. So it's not that hard. So nonetheless, you just come in, and then you can give a little support. And then they'll set up some kind of small fund, and then be able to support the priest and be able to take the train over, fly over, come and say the Mass, and then the priest, I think, will come in time. And then you got to put pressure on Bishop Williamson. Because Bishop Williamson wants to rest here. Thou shalt not allow him to rest. Because remember that, you know, he thinks he's an old man. He's forgetting that, you know, I was raised around old men. He's not an old man. We have Father Xavier Ignatius in India who's 93 years old. And he can run circles around Bishop Williamson. And he does. He rolls all over the place. He jumps on top of the... He travels on the train. As an example, Father Xavier Ignatius told me an example just last year, or a couple of years ago. And at that time he was only 88. And he said, you know, some man said, excuse me, sir, or Father, would you mind taking the top bunk? You know, in the trains, you've got the bottom bunk, middle bunk, and top bunk. In our Indian trains, if you go in the sleeping class. And so at night train. And I said, can you take the top bunk? Because my dad, he's 60 years old. Can you take the top bunk? Yes, sure. So he climbed up the top bunk, and he said, you know, how old is your dad? He says, you know how old I am? He went, I'm 88. Oh, you want to take the bottom bunk? He says, no, it's nice up here. You know? And so he climbed up the top bunk, and there's no ladder, and you know, you just kind of grab onto this, grab onto that, jump up, and you jump on the top bunk. And so that's what he's doing at the age of 88, 89. So I mean, so God will give us strength. There's no trouble for that. What you do is you establish a chapel. I know Bishop Williamson has to travel in and out. And he wants a little bit of peace. He can have a little bit of peace, but don't let him have too much. You just, you know, so you just say that, you know, at least once in a month, at least once in a while, he can come in and say the Mass for you. And we know he has to travel around the world. Right now, he's with Father Giselle in Asia. Right now, he's with Father Giselle in Philippines and in India. He sent me a note saying Nut Giselle is in full form. So, and he is nuts, by the way. He really is. And so one day, hopefully, you have to have him come here just so you can just take pictures, write notes, because he is crazy. And, you know, it's very, very interesting seeing a crazy padre. And but in any case, you know, so he's there with Bishop Williamson. They're going around doing the confirmations, visiting the people, giving talks, encouraging our people in the Philippines, and also in Singapore, and in Kuala Lumpur, and in Korea, and in Japan. So he's on a big trip there right now. So Bishop Williamson isn't here right now. He'll be back very soon. But in any case, that's enough of that. But we need to go through some of the objections to our movement. And, you know, one of them is the May 5th protocol. We have to deal with that. Where is it here? The May 5th protocol. That Archbishop, we'll just go quickly through it because it won't take long here. That Archbishop Pfeiffers signed the May 5th protocol in 1988. And that Archbishop Pfeiffers was in favor of a deal with Rome. And that he had no problems with it. Father Rossan gave me an example. Father Rossan said, remember in 1987 or 1980, when was that quote? In any case, I think it was 87 or possibly 86, when Archbishop Pfeiffers met with Cardinal Ratzinger. No, the Cardinal Ratzinger is the common thread throughout all this. Met with Cardinal Ratzinger, and he said, Cardinal, even if you give us our own bishops, even if you give us a certain autonomy, we cannot work together because we are working for the Christianization of society and you are working for the de-Christianization of society. You remember that quote? I think it was 86. So Father Ostan, in an argument we had last year at ordinations, when he was yelling at me, he came to me and he said he just came from screaming at Bishop Tissier. Bishop Tissier preached a scandalous sermon. You should hear the sermon June 15th of last year, the ordination sermon, in Winona. How many of you have heard that sermon?
No.
You should listen to it. It's still available on the internet. It's a very good sermon. And it's about the fact that we can't have compromise. It's almost as scandalous as Father Hugo's sermon got him expelled on June 17th. You should listen to that sermon also. Father Hugo preached his sermon on Sunday, which caused us being expelled from the society. And he preached it in the tent. First Mass of a new priest with the superior here and priest there. I was at the sermon. I remember watching the other priests, the superior priests, they were unhappy. But he just preached, and he did not mention anything negative about the SSPX. He only mentioned about the compromise of the Cristeros. And when the Cristeros compromised, they were slain. More died in the compromise than died in the 4 years' war against the enemies of God. And that when he was saying that, I remember watching the faces of those priests at that time. They were very angry, because the same thing is happening in society, and it will have the same results. And they know it. In their hearts, they know it. But you should listen to both of those sermons, June 17th and June 15th. It's easy to find, and in the Sign You Shall Conquer. Just look at Bishop Tissier, the sermon there, June 15th, and Bishop Father Hugo's sermon of June 17th. That got them, Bishop Tissier yelled at Father Rostand. When he finished yelling at Father Rostand and finished yelling at Bishop Tissier, he came and yelled at me. But he told me, I'm being much nicer to you in our hour or so of being yelled at than I was to Bishop Tissier. That's what he told me. I'm being much kinder to you than I was to Bishop Tissier. I told Bishop Tissier, he doesn't know the mind of the Archbishop. He knows nothing about the Archbishop. He's against the Archbishop. And I said, how do you wrote the book? Really thick book. You know, on Archbishop Lefebvre. And he knew Archbishop Lefebvre before you were born, for heaven's sakes. How do you say he doesn't know the Archbishop? But nonetheless, that's what he said. We quoted me in 1986, that quote. Did you remember Bishop Fillets, Archbishop Lefebvre said, even if you give us our own autonomy, our own bishop, we cannot work together because you're working for the Dechristianization Society and I'm working for the Christianization Society. And he said, that's what he said in 86. You remember that? Of course I remember that. Well, in 87, he worked for a deal with Rome, with Cardinal Ratzinger. So obviously he didn't really mean what he said in 86. Well, we didn't see that as a contradiction. And then he said, and then in 88, Archbishop Lefebvre signed the May 5th Protocol. He signed the May 5th Protocol, and in that May 5th Protocol, it says, you know, that essentially the same thing. That's what the Bishop Fillet is trying to say now. At that time we didn't know about the April 15th Declaration, although he did. I didn't. And so he said that, okay, so, well, that was his argument. So that's one of the objections. That Archbishop Lefebvre said we cannot work together in 86. Then he tried to work with him in 87. He said we cannot accept anything of the council, but then he accepted the May 5th Protocol. Therefore, Bishop Fillet has the right to do the same thing. And that's the argument. Now the answer. Number one, Archbishop Lefebvre did not make a deal with Rome and Cardinal Ratzinger. He did not work together with them. He said no to the deal with Rome. He talked about the possibility of maybe working something out with Rome between the end of 87 and early 88. Because, as Archbishop Lefebvre himself said, it's what they all wanted. The priests, which one was Father Tissier de Malaret, Father Bizic, Father, you know, what's his name in Rome, you know, it doesn't matter. A whole bunch of the priests, you can see his face now, I can't remember his name. Father Duchalard, and others. They all wanted this deal with Rome. And they said, you have to go with this, you've got to make an attempt of it. And he said, all right, I'll show you, priests. Okay, we'll try it. I'll talk to the Romans. And you can see for yourself how holy and good they are. And I'll deal with the Romans, and let's give them a fair chance. Why not? Guess what? He gave them a fair chance. And he said, if we had gone ahead with this protocol of May the 5th, he said in the June 30th sermon of 1988, it would have been Operation Suicide. That's the reason for the title of the book that Mr. Fox wrote. It would be Operation Suicide. He also said in the June 13th letter or talk to the future bishops, the 4 bishops elect, had we gone ahead with this, it would have been a cause of disunity and the ripping apart of the Society of St. Pius X. Guess what's happening 25 years later? The same thing. Right? The prophecy is being fulfilled. We see disunity in the SSPX. And then it would be the death of the society. He said, we would not last a year. We would not last a year. And then he said, what kind of seminarians would we get? Suppose they say if you get approved by Rome, you're going to get all these vocations. But what kind of vocations? Vocations that want both masses? Do we want vocations of compromise? You know, my uncle was a cop in the Miami Vice. And the Vice Squad against the drugs. And he had his partner for many years. One day, they were out fighting against the bad guys, and there was drug dealers inside of it. And he was in the forward command post, so to speak, and he was shooting at the bad guys, they were shooting at him, and a bullet went bang against the wall. Kept shooting, another bang. And he said, wait a minute. The bad guys are over there. And this bullet is coming here. That's not the bad guy shooting at me. It was his partner. He realized that he realized in the fight, it was exactly like Urias. You know, you go forward, but they didn't kill him. So next thing you know, bullets are hitting the back of the wall, you know. And he went back, somebody said, oh, it was an accident, you know, I guess we were, you know. Wait a minute, they're over there, and I'm over here. How do you accidentally go? How do you do that? So he got into taking care of canine dogs after that. When you've got your own people shooting at you, you're not in unity. And what's happening now in the society, the priests don't trust each other anymore. There is a ripping apart. Even the priests inside the priory, they don't know where they stand anymore. The ripping apart is there. Now, living in that environment will destroy a normal man. The priests are under great stress. They're questioning themselves. They're questioning the things that they don't even know anymore. I remember my dad. My dad he didn't understand the fear of heights. And I remember when he used to work in skyscrapers at the top of the buildings. And I remember one time I was working with him. We built all the houses on our property. We built, and we were up on the roof, be a little higher than that, slightly higher than that, you know, a little bit higher, and walking across the trusses. And I was carrying a 2x10, and he says, hurry up! You know, now, I was afraid of falling, you know, because I was 11, 12 years old, and I figured the concrete was not good for my house, and I didn't really want to fall. And so I was moving really slow, going, what are you doing? Hurry up! And then he didn't understand that you know, I was scared of that. And we couldn't comprehend it. He said, you just step on the wood, and you're not going to fall. What's the problem? Move. And then but then, later on, my same dad, he was walking at the Ford plant a few years before he retired on a concrete, what do you call it, beam that was like a yard wide. And he used to walk on a little bitty 2x4s. Now he on the yard wide, and he fell off. And then he didn't get killed, but he got hurt, and he fell off. But he couldn't believe that he fell off this wide thing. And then he lost his confidence. Now, you know, things have changed. That's what's happening to society priests right now. They used to walk across the skyscrapers, you know, and no problem. Now they're on a big wide beam, and like, I don't know. They're losing their confidence. They're in a state of stress. That's the good ones. The wicked ones advance. In this environment, it is designed to destroy priests. I know priests right now that are being worked on by society superiors through the psychological mind games. I'll tell you the name of one of them, since everybody knows. Father Selenov is one. Father Pino is another. Father Selenov and Father Pino. They're destroying them. Playing with their minds. You're going to have a trial, and they're trying to psychologically destroy them. And they have psychologically destroyed other priests. How long can these priests go under that stress? So that's why it's so important for you to establish something here. And then these priests have a place to kind of go, get their strength back, get their confidence back, and go back in the battlefield. But in any case, continuing Father Rostand's objection, the Archers of the Fèvre still cannot work together, but then he was willing to work together in 87. Well, in fact, Archers of the Fèvre made good on his statement of 86 by his actions in 88. By consecrating the 4 bishops, and by telling those 4 bishops, you keep your mitres and your croziers. You know, when the mitre, you know what the prayer is? When they put the mitre on the head of the bishop, receive the horns of both testaments. They're horns. Receive the horns of both testaments, and with these horns drive away the enemy of the sheep. They're weapons. Same thing with the staff. It's got one side with the hook, which is to pull the sheep out of the pit. And the other side is a whipstaff or claymore or whatever you want to call it. It's for whacking the bad guys. That's what it's for. It's a weapon. The bishop is a soldier, carries weapons, and he is supposed to use them. And our General Fèvre said, you keep your croziers, you keep your mitres, until such time as Rome converts. When Rome converts, you lay them in front of the Pope to be at his disposal. But until that time, you see a modernist, whack, bang! That's what you do. And so the fact is, until that time, it's wartime. Now, he showed by his actions, he showed by his words, both before 88 and after 88, that he wasn't willing to compromise with the modernists. He also said in 89, which was after 88. See, Father Rostand says, 86, he said, we're not going to work together. But in 88, we were willing to work together. So if it was true that Archers of the Fèvre changed his doctrine, then you would find, after 88, no contrary statements. Then after 88, he would no longer say we can't work together. But what does it say in 89? These people that go to the Indult Mass, they are betraying us, they are betraying us, they are betraying us. And these people that say, 1989, these people that say, oh, it's a shame that we can't work together, they must make up their minds. It's a shame that we're not approved. No, it's not. The shame is in the fool that doesn't approve of us. I remember one time, I met with a bishop of Phoenix, Arizona. I met with a bishop, a new bishop, Bishop Stafford. I think he's still the bishop there, but at that time he was the new bishop. Okay, I went to see Bishop Stafford, and Father Leith went to visit him. And he said, Bishop, what's your problem with us? He said, my problem with you is that you're not approved. I said, oh, okay. Well, all you have to do is approve of us, and you don't have a problem with us anymore. Right? And then I said, oh, right. Well, you're not approved by Rome, but you know, and so, well, if that's the only problem, then he's the only one that can fix it. He is the one that does the approval papers, not me. And then I told him, I said, Your Excellency, if I was a bishop, one of the very first things I would do would be to approve of myself. You know, the top priority list of things to do. But I'm not a bishop, so it's not my problem. I'm not responsible for approving of myself. That's a bishop's problem. I am responsible for taking care of my sheep, for teaching the faith and condemning the errors, and that's what I'm doing. And answering the call of the sheep, who have the right to receive these things. Your duty is to approve of it. And if you don't approve of it, you have to answer that before God. That's how it works. This is the old society way, the old society teaching. It has changed now. So in that 86 objection to Father Rostand, we see that in 86, he said we can't work together. In 89, he said we can't work together. In 88, he said we can't work together. He said it many times in 87, and up until he died in 91. We have one aberration, which for a very brief period of a few months, he tried to work with the Romans. And what did he say in 88? He said, I was disturbed when I was sitting at that table. Father Esposito told me about it last year. Father Esposito was at Ordinations in America last year.